Hello Shining Stars and welcome back to the channel. My name is Trey and today is part 2 of 3 of the Artist BootCamp. Some lessons for the beginners who want to study an art. So last week we went over lines, simple shapes, complex shapes, but also some head and hands and the measurements and all of that. We're going to also do that today, but also in a very shortened form. But the main feature of today's video will be anatomy. Yes, simplified muscles, mostly the ones that one can see upon the body. And we're going to map that to a mannequin, which I think is very good to study from. So let's get started. So first, let's do a quick recap of what we did last week. And that was to go over lines, simple shapes, and complex shapes, which are the basis for everything. And simple shapes are comprised of circles, squares, rectangles, triangles. And we use simple shapes to make up more complex shapes. And the complex shapes are the cube, the cylinder, pyramid, cone, and sphere. And with these complex shapes, we use light to simulate the idea that they are an object sitting in space, which is a simulation for what we see in real life. Then we applied those simple shapes to constructing things like, in this example, the hands. Hands can be a modified box, circles for joints, cylinders for the fingers, and we can do that with just about anything, from the body to objects around us, anything at all. And then we tackled something that is much more complex, which is the human skull, which can be broken down in measurements like the hairline, the eye ridge, the eye line, nose line, mouth line, and chin. And we can break down with simple shapes using the cranium with a circle, divide it down the middle. We have a side plane just in case we want to shine light on it. We can indicate where that light falls. But again, we have the hairline up top, the brow ridge just above the eyes, and the eye line is where the eyes sit. The nose line is at the bottom of the nose. The mouth is right where the teeth would be, and the chin. So now let's look into the anatomy of the human body. But this is my introductory study for the muscles. So I have my skeleton, and then I have the muscles color-coded, drawn. So let's run through this. Starting from the top to the bottom, we have the trapezius, which is your shoulder, your upper shoulder, and your neck, going along this clavicle bone, which goes across your body. The deltoid is your shoulder muscle. The tricep is on the back of your upper arm. And going from the back to the front, there's the tricep on the back, the brachialis on the side in green, and the bicep on the front. So front to back is the bicep, the brachialis, and the tricep. Back to front, tricep, brachialis, bicep. Then going from getting to the mid of your arm and down to the lower arm, the brachioradialis that goes from the outside and comes inwards towards your thumb. Then we have extensors and flexors, which are bundles of muscles in your forearm that help you move your hand. Your hand needs a lot of range of motion, and that's what your extensors and flexors do. Coming towards the torso of the body, we have the pectoralis, this large muscle, your pecs. We have the external obliques, which is in pink on the side. The serratus anterior, which are lightning bolt shaped muscles that I've kind of bundled into this external obliques. We have the rectus abdominis, the upper and lower. The upper part can be called your six-pack, can be fairly visible on the human body. And the lower part goes from just below the belly button towards the groin. Of your upper leg, we have the gracilis on the inside of your leg. And then from the hip, we have the sartorius. And it goes from the outside of your hip and crosses inwards towards your inner thigh. And then between that, the gracilis and the sartorius, is the adductor longus. On the outside of the upper thigh is the vastus lateralis, and there's also a vastus medialis, which is on the inside of your thigh. And then between them is the rectus femoris. So vastus medialis would be on the inside, rectus femoris in the middle, vastus lateralis on the outside of your thigh. Now, of the lower leg, the patella is your kneecap. And then we have the patellar tendon that goes from the kneecap towards the ankle. The gastrocnemius is also called your calf muscle, is on the inside of your lower leg. Anterior tibialis is right on the outside of your lower leg in blue. The fibularis longus is on the outside of your lower leg. And between the fibularis longus on the outside, the anterior tibialis towards the middle, is the extensor digitorum longus, is between the two in red. And those are the muscles, but this is just the basic. Start with these and then go deeper as one feels is necessary. I have a much more extensive in the summer study of anatomy from last year. I'll put that in a playlist if it hasn't already in there. But we go over these muscles and a lot more, much more extensively in that, if you are so inclined. So now let's go to the mannequin. So with the mannequin study, why I like to use mannequins, because it is like a proto-human, usually without a face, but usually there is some slight muscles. So we're going to do this two ways. We're going to use simple shapes for a breakdown of the body, and then we'll also do a draping of the muscles. And first we're going to start off with shapes. Shapes are the building blocks of drawing. So circle for the cranium, where the brain is housed. And then you can make an egg shape. It is the mandible, which is attached. You can use a cylinder for the neck. Then there's some slight contrapposto, which is the hip tilt and shoulder tilt. So if we look at the shoulders, it's tilted slightly like that. This is the dominant leg, and with the dominant leg holding most of the weight, your hips will dip at a slight angle. Right? This is contrapposto. Now you can make this more dramatic, as they do in old Roman statuary, which is why I like to study statues. But for this, right, this is the hip tilt, contrapposto. The spine would be like this, using that dominant leg as the pillar. For the rib cage, we make a simple egg shape. The joints will be circles. So for the joint of the shoulders, elbows, wrists, knees, and ankles. And then we connect those with cylinders or straight lines to imply a cylinder. So a human being can be constructed rather simply. Let's use a flattened box for the hand, and then fingers radiating off of that. Again, simple side of the box and radiating fingers. The hip can be a box, slightly turned. And again, we can do the cylinders or lines for the legs. And then simplified feet. Usually I break it into heel. There's the middle part of the foot, and then the digits, the toes. And that is simplified. Simple shapes to make this form. So let's try that again, but this time we're going to do the muscles. And let's change the color to a red. So for the muscles, we have the trapezius, right, the neck and shoulder, going much more along the back to make like a diamond shape. But we have also the deltoid of the shoulder. The tricep is on the back. The brachialis on the side of the arm. and then the bicep is on the front. The brachioradialis comes from the outside, comes in towards the thumb. We have extensors and flexors of the forearm that help flex and move your hand in multiple various poses. Going towards the trunk, we have the pecs, the pectoralis, going again along the clavicle, which is this bone across your, right, just above your rib cage, going across. We have the external obliques. Serratus anterior looks like that lightning bolts, but the external obliques is on the side of the body. The rectus abdominis, upper, right, and then at the belly button, and then down is the lower. Going towards the thighs, we have the gracilis on the inside of your thigh. Right, you can see that. We have the sartorius that comes from the hip, goes across the hip and towards your inner thigh. And then between the sartorius and the gracilis is the adductor longus. Adductor longus. And then for the lower part of your thigh, we have the vastus lateralis. Lateral means the outside, so the outside of your thigh. The vastus medialis, which is on the inside of your thigh. And then the rectus femoris sits between those, or actually covers some of both. And then we have the patella, which is your kneecap, patella. The patellar tendon goes from the kneecap towards your ankle. The gastrocnemius is your calf muscle. Gastrocnemius, I like saying that. The anterior tibialis is just on the outside. Here it's in blue. I'm doing it in red because everything's red. And then the fibularis longus is on the outside of your thigh. Your outside of your lower leg. And between the fibularis longus and the anterior tibialis, we have the extensor digitorum longus in red. And this is a short workout of the muscles of the body. All right, Shining Stars, that was Artist BootCamp, episode 2 of 3, where we went over lines, simple shapes, complex shapes, did some hands and some heads, and also looked at anatomy and mapped that to a mannequin. Now, next week's episode, the final, will be much of the same, but this time on anatomy and mapping that to Roman or Greek statuary. I have to figure out which one. But that is next week's episode. So, I have been Trey Hodges. You can find my work at treyhodges.com. Power to all of the creators, and I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.